The VIP garage tarmac shimmered. The golden Lamborghini Huracan sat motionless, hood open, surrounded by hushed mechanics. The expensive scent of burnt oil hung in the air, a silent testament to the failure. Janitor Ryan Cole, in greasy overalls, stood nearby. His son Oliver watched from the fence, feeling the raw sting of contempt. CEO Vivien Hart emerged in a sharp suit. She fixed Ryan with a cold, mocking smirk and declared, "Repair this Lamborghini, and I'm yours." Cruel laughter echoed from the certified technicians. Ryan remained calm. The critical warning light pulsed desperate red. Ryan Cole was the definition of quiet competence, hiding behind an insignificant job title. At 41, he was a single father whose world revolved entirely around his 8-year-old son, Oliver. His current role was listed as contract maintenance specialist for the premier luxury car storage facility, but in reality, he was the guy who cleaned up oil spills, swept the pristine floors, and performed basic, quick-fix tasks that the certified engineers deemed beneath them. His pay was minimal, but the predictability of the schedule allowed him to be both the sole provider and the sole parent to Oliver. Very few people knew that Ryan's greasy overalls concealed a legacy of brilliance. He wasn't just a mechanic. He was once a highly respected drivetrain and powertrain systems engineer for a top-tier European racing firm. His hands had fine-tuned the performance algorithms and gear ratios of vehicles that broke speed records across the globe. He was a master of high-performance internal combustion systems. However, 7 years ago, a catastrophic failure, a structural flaw he had warned management about repeatedly, resulted in a spectacular race accident. Though cleared of any mechanical negligence, the corporate fallout was ruthless. He lost his status, his career, and shortly after, his wife, who could not handle the pressure. Overwhelmed by grief and the immediate necessity of stability for his infant son, Ryan walked away from the high-octane world forever. He traded million-dollar research grants for minimum wage predictability. He valued Oliver's stability far above his own shattered pride. Oliver, a quiet, observant boy, was Ryan's constant companion during the long daytime shifts. The boy was intimately familiar with the intoxicating sense of high-octane racing fuel and premium synthetic oil. He loved watching the quiet, assured way his father handled tools, always patient, always precise. This predictable routine was Oliver's security blanket, and Ryan would protect it fiercely. The woman who had just delivered the brutal insult, Vivien Hart, was the antithesis of Ryan's quiet life. She was the CEO of Hart Global Investments, a firm known for its aggressive takeovers and uncompromising efficiency. Vivien operated with absolute authority and viewed any delay, error, or inefficiency as a personal slight against her brilliance. She was used to obedience and worshiped competence, but only the kind that wore a designer suit. The stunning yellow Lamborghini was more than just a car. It was the essential, time-critical transport to seal a multi-billion-dollar acquisition deal on the other side of the city. Vivien needed to arrive at the closing table in 30 minutes. Every minute of delay was costing her firm millions in market speculation fees and contractual penalties. The car had suddenly shut down, reporting a deep-level electronic fault that had completely baffled her dedicated technical crew. The engineers, all sporting immaculate shirts and expensive degrees, were focused exclusively on the car's complex electronic control unit, ECU, convinced the issue was a software glitch or a data corruption error. They were arguing over diagnostic port readings and proprietary codes. Ryan, observing from his humble distance while polishing a fuel pump, felt a professional unease turn into certainty. His internal combustion intuition immediately sensed the problem. The way the engine had died, not with a bang, but with a sickeningly smooth mechanical silence, told him the issue wasn't the code. The fault reported by the ECU was merely a symptom. The real problem was physical, rooted deep in the fuel delivery system or a key mechanical sensor. He recognized the subtle signature of a catastrophic failure waiting to happen. Ryan knew the car wasn't just stalled, it was a ticking financial time bomb. And if the engine was started again without the correct fix, the damage could spiral into total engine replacement. The engineers, however, never saw Ryan. They saw a janitor, an invisible man whose only role was to clean up their messes. His pride could wait. but the truth couldn't. Ryan gripped his toolbox, deciding that silence would cost more than dignity. The tension in the garage thickened. Dr. Pierce, the lead engineering consultant, a man who prided himself on his algorithms, was locked in a bitter, high-volume argument with the dealership's floor manager. Pierce insisted the fault was a primary ECU data stream latency mismatch, demanding a full system reboot, which would take hours. The manager argued against the reboot, fearing it would void the warranty. They were arguing over procedure and ego, wasting critical minutes. The estimated financial cost of the delay had just surpassed 7 figures. Vivien Hart watched the display of expensive incompetence, her face hardening into a mask of pure, icy fury. The fiasco was a humiliation. She glanced at the immobile Lamborghini, then her sharp eyes flicked back to Ryan Cole. Mr. Finch, a junior executive attempting to curry favor, tried to break the tension by echoing the CEO's earlier insult. He gave a forced, booming laugh, nudging a colleague. "Hear that, Miller? Seems like the boss is getting desperate. Go on, suit up. If you fix it, you get the ride and the ring." A few staff members laughed nervously, the sound hollow and brutal. Oliver, standing near the fence, visibly flinched. He tightened his grip on his helmet, his face etched with confusion and sudden, painful shame. Ryan felt the familiar sting of disrespect, but the deeper hurt was the look on his son's face. He gently lowered his toolbox and walked toward the huddle, the faint squeak of his worn rubber soles a quiet counterpoint to the roaring anxiety. He walked past Dr. Pierce, heading straight for the open engine bay. "Excuse me," Ryan stated, his voice quiet but possessing an astonishing authority that cut through the noise. "The ECU error is a tertiary reading. The failure is physical. The fuel pressure regulator has collapsed due to a sediment blockage. You are reading a fuel starvation warning as a software fault. I need 5 minutes with the injectors." Dr. Pierce spun around, his face flushed with arrogance and panic. "Get back to your cleaning station. Who gave you clearance? You're a janitor. You have absolutely no understanding of the proprietary fuel management logic. Your diagnosis contradicts the diagnostic software output." Pierce's face turned crimson. "This is a V10, dual injection, high RPM roadster, not a pickup truck. We're dealing with a proprietary CAN bus communication error on the fuel map initialization sequence. You wouldn't even understand the diagnostic readouts, much less the fuel map geometry. Your intuition, Mr. Janitor, is worthless against validated diagnostics." Vivien, her patience evaporated, finally pointed a finger at Ryan. "The only thing you are authorized to handle is the refuse, Cole. This situation demands precision that your basic skills cannot provide." She pulled out her phone, the display showing a flurry of missed calls and plunging stock numbers. The collateral damage of the delay was rapidly becoming unacceptable. She desperately needed a quick fix, but not one tainted by the very low status she disdained. "I am telling you, the car is starved for fuel, not code," Ryan asserted, ignoring the insult. "If you force a restart, the dry running will create catastrophic bearing damage in the transmission. The primary fuel pump pressure drop is causing the ECU to enter safe mode. Let me check the relay." "You're questioning my PhD, Miller?" Pierce demanded, his voice cracking with professional panic. "You clean the oil, I design the engine. Stay away." Vivien stepped forward, her authority absolute. "He's right, Mr. Miller. Your authority is limited to the mop. This vehicle is too sensitive for guesswork. Get back to your station." Just then, the engineers, desperate and out of options, decided on a reckless course. They initiated a manual, high-pressure bypass and attempted a forced ignition sequence. The engine sputtered to life with an agonizing, violent rattle. The entire car shook, not just a vibration, but a deep, sickening convulsion that sounded like grinding metal. The noise was unbearable, a death knell. The technical team instinctively retreated, shielding their faces. The agonizing rattle lasted barely 3 seconds before the chief engineer, his face now sickly gray, frantically hit the kill switch. The silence that followed was terrifyingly final. Pierce slowly backed away from the engine, visibly shaking, recognizing the sound of metal tearing metal. He looked at Ryan, a spark of desperate recognition in his eyes, but his pride still held him mute. The scent of hot, burnt lubricant now mingled with the expensive perfume of the CEO. Vivien watched, her jaw clenching, the realization hitting her. The engine failure had moved from a recoverable error to a multi-million-dollar disaster, exactly as the janitor had warned. Ryan knew instantly they had accelerated the damage. He turned, his eyes finding Oliver's. The boy's face was now pale with fear. Ryan remembered the promise he made to his son. Dignity isn't about the job title, son. It's about being the quiet person who fixes the noise. He took a slow, deep breath, walked toward the now terrified Vivien, and spoke directly. His voice was low, cutting through the chaos like a laser. Ms. Hart, stop the engine now. That sound is your gearbox failing. If that car attempts to move 10 feet, the transmission will seize, costing you the entire engine block. The cost is no longer money. It is a full multi-million-dollar loss. I am telling you, as a high-performance system specialist, the car is dead unless you listen to the one person here who understands its mechanics. The chilling, absolute certainty in Ryan's voice silenced the entire crowd, eclipsing the sound of the now dying engine. Vivien, accustomed to the soft lies of yes men, heard a note of unvarnished, terrifying truth. She knew instinctively that this man was not lying. She had exhausted every expensive option. She had mocked her last chance. If you'd like to see how this moment unfolds, you're welcome to subscribe and continue with us. The oppressive silence returned, broken only by the sharp metallic ticking of the cooling, severely damaged engine. Vivien Hart's face, usually impervious, now showed a mixture of professional fear and dawning, gut-wrenching realization. Twist 1. The corporate catastrophe. The crisis escalated immediately. The dealership manager, terrified by the engine rattle, officially refused to let the vehicle move, citing catastrophic risk. Dr. Pierce and his team, unable to find a software solution, stood paralyzed by their own academic arrogance. Vivien's assistant reappeared, reporting the terminal news. The acquisition deadline was now 1 hour away. The opposing firm was demanding a massive, non-refundable penalty for operational negligence, threatening to tank the deal. Hart Global's stock was already reporting a pre-market dip on rumors of transport failure. The company's solvency was stalled on the tarmac next to a $5 million car. Vivien looked at Ryan, the man she had just insulted. The man whose prediction of terminal failure had been confirmed by the horrible sound of the engine. She had nowhere else to turn. You called yourself a specialist, Mr. Cole, Vivien challenged, her voice tight, strained. Explain. Now. Twist 2. The truth revealed and tested. Ryan did not offer a CV or a defense. He offered only cold, actionable physics. I was the chief drivetrain design engineer for KSR Racing. I designed the high-pressure fuel lines and pressure regulation systems for vehicles faster than this, Ryan stated, his voice flat, professional. The issue is the primary pressure regulator, PPR. It's blocked by microsediment. The ECU is correctly reading a massive pressure drop, but its logic chain faults to a software error, not a mechanical blockage. When your engineers forced the ignition, they ran the gearbox dry, causing the transmission to start cannibalizing itself. The microsediment isn't large enough to trip a hard fault, but it's enough to intermittently choke the high-pressure side. The ECU compensates, spiking the pump, but the blockage creates cavitation and thermal shear, which the transmission sensors incorrectly read as a communication error. The ECU, thinking the fuel system is just not responding fast enough. It's a classic low RPM physical choke, masquerading as a high-tech digital ghost. Ryan didn't wait for permission. He immediately knelt, showing the specific point beneath the chassis. The executives on the remote video call continued their frantic demands, but Vivien ignored the headset, her attention fixed entirely on the movement of Ryan's hands. The price of her arrogance was being paid in the form of a kneeling janitor, saving her empire. He continued, his hands already moving to retrieve a small custom-made wrench. A full PPR replacement requires a 6-hour engine-out service. I can perform a field strip and manual purge of the PPR without removing the fuel lines, using the service port on the undercarriage. It will temporarily restore full pressure, allowing the engine to run cleanly for exactly one high-speed trip. But the car must be driven by someone who understands the feel of the transmission, not just the gauges. Vivien's executives watching remotely were screaming objections about corporate liability and criminal negligence. But Vivien was listening to the voice of the only person who offered a solution. Ruin was certain if they did nothing. This was the only bet. She looked at Ryan. You have 10 minutes to make it safe, then you will drive it. The executive meeting room erupted. The general counsel was screaming about the absolute liability risk of letting an unvetted mechanic drive the priceless asset during a financial crisis. Vivien cut them off with a look of terrifying, absolute authority. She knew the numbers. An hour's delay meant a potential $500 million loss and the end of her deal. She was betting her entire reputation and the financial future of her company on the gut feeling of the man she had humiliated. Her eyes, usually calculated, now held a terrifying, cold glint of absolute necessity. Ryan Cole wasn't just fixing a car, he was the last line of defense against the dissolution of her empire. Every executive present understood the implied threat. If he failed, they all failed. The silence that followed her decision was the heaviest silence Ryan had ever known. It was the sound of billions of dollars waiting for a man in dirty overalls to perform a miracle. Oliver, watching from behind the fence, saw the transformation. His father had shed the hunched posture of the janitor. He stood tall, authoritative, a leader again. The boy watched, holding his breath until his lungs ached, as a flurry of activity surrounded his dad. Ryan changed his gloves. He bypassed the complex digital diagnostic equipment and took only 3 tools: his custom wrench, a pressure regulator tool, and a simple high-powered flashlight. He did not open the hood again. He got low and, with the agility of a professional racer, disappeared beneath the low-slung chassis. Ryan worked swiftly but without haste. The cramped space required him to operate almost entirely by touch, his fingers finding the precise, hidden fittings. He used a small, specialized mirror to confirm the position of the check valve. Oliver, standing near the wheels, became Ryan's silent lookout. When Ryan needed to release pressure incrementally, he would glance at Oliver, who would watch the digital clock on a distant monitor and give a subtle, tiny nod. A nonverbal, 2-person team operating under unimaginable pressure. For those 10 minutes, the janitor and his son were the only ones in command of the financial future of Hart Global. Vivien found herself unconsciously checking her watch, counting down the seconds, her breath catching with every faint metallic scrape from beneath the car. He worked in the tight space beneath the car, his hands moving with the speed and confidence of a surgeon performing a routine procedure. He found the maintenance access port, located the blocked PPR, and carefully stripped it down. He performed the pressure bleed and manual adjustment, relying entirely on the feel of the metal under his fingertips, ignoring the panicked readings flashing in the cockpit. He was communicating with the car's physical body, fixing the root cause, ignoring the digital chaos. 9 minutes and 45 seconds later, Ryan slid out from under the car. He gave a quiet, firm thumbs up. Vivien gave the command to start the engine. The engine roared to life, but this time, the sound was different. It was the pure, smooth, expensive growl of a perfectly tuned Huracan engine. The terrible metallic rattle was gone, replaced by a deep, stable hum. The engineers stared at their displays, which still showed residual fault codes, but the primary catastrophic issue was fixed. The car was running clean. Ryan climbed into the driver's seat. He adjusted the mirrors, ran his hand over the leather, and checked the feel of the steering wheel. With the graceful ease of a professional driver, he shifted into first gear. The car moved forward smoothly and powerfully. He performed a short, professional perimeter test, not showboating, but clinically testing the stability of his manual adjustment. Down on the tarmac, Vivien Hart stood perfectly still. Her ice-cold exterior had shattered completely. Her eyes tracked the movement of the car, then darted to the stunned, humbled faces of her technical team. She felt a sickening, profound realization. She had almost cost her entire company billions by valuing a diploma over true skill. She realized the cost of her arrogance was measured not just in money, but in the near destruction of a masterpiece, in the public humiliation of a genuinely indispensable man. The 10-minute operational window was holding. Ryan brought the car to a perfect, silent stop. He had done his job. Vivien had no words. She had found a genius, and she had ridiculed him in front of his son. The price of her arrogant joke had just gone up infinitely, and she knew she had to pay it in full. Ryan climbed out of the low-slung car, returning the multi-million-dollar asset to its designated spot with the effortless precision of a professional driver. A move that spoke louder than any certificate or title. The smooth roar of the engine faded, replaced by the profound, heavy silence of respect and dawning awe. No one laughed. No one spoke. The engineers, humbled and slack-jawed, looked at Ryan, no longer seeing a janitor, but an undeniable master of his high-performance craft. Their expensive degrees suddenly felt weightless, exposed by the simple manual brilliance of the man they had dismissed. The first action came from Oliver. The boy sprinted from the safety fence, running straight into his father's arms. Oliver's face was glowing, a mixture of pride, shock, and pure, boundless relief. Ryan knelt down, putting himself at eye level with his son. He spoke softly, his voice for Oliver only. "I'm sorry I scared you, buddy. Are you all right?" Oliver shook his head fiercely, clinging to his father's oily overalls. "No, Dad. You were the best. You were like a superhero mechanic." Ryan smiled, a rare, genuine smile that eased the tension around his eyes. He kept his voice low, but his words were meant to teach, not just comfort. "See how people change, son. Always remember what they say when they think you're nobody. True power is knowing you can fix something no one else can even understand." The moment was intensely private, yet publicly witnessed. Vivien watched the interaction. She realized that the true value of the man was not his wrench-turning skill, but his absolute clarity of purpose, a stability her billions had never bought. His commitment to his son was the source of his professional focus and integrity. Ryan, having saved the company's financial future, calmly peeled off his soiled gloves and walked toward his humble janitorial cart, his extraordinary duty completed. Dr. Pierce, the humiliated engineering consultant, approached Ryan, his arrogance replaced by a crushed sincerity. "Mr. Cole," he mumbled, his voice barely audible, "I have never been so wrong in my career. I apologize for my words. My blindness almost cost Ms. Hart everything." Mr. Finch, the manager who had joked about the marriage, stood beside him, equally chastened. "We owe you an immeasurable debt, Ryan. You saved the deal." Ryan accepted their apologies with a quiet, disarming humility. He simply nodded. "No debt. Next time, start with the physical mechanics, not the software. The display only shows what the sensors tell it, and sensors lie." He then picked up his mop and bucket. Vivien, standing alone, now saw the uniform not as a symbol of low status, but as a deliberate shield. He was a man who chose anonymity to protect his family and who chose competence over corporate glory. The respect she offered him, though late and born of financial desperation, was entirely genuine. Ryan had taught the ruthless CEO a fundamental lesson about value. Skill is always silent, but success will roar, and true competence needs no validation. In the quiet, highly private executive office, Vivien Hart wasted no time on false pleasantries. The deal was saved, the crisis averted, and the market hemorrhaging was stopped. Now came the professional reckoning. She addressed the insult directly before any negotiation. She did not deflect blame, she owned it. She stood before Ryan, a woman accustomed to being feared, and performed the hardest act of corporate leadership, a public, unreserved admission of her arrogance. "Mr. Cole," she began, her tone formal and serious, "my comment earlier, 'Repair this Lamborghini and I'm yours,' was unforgivable. It was born of entitlement and panic. It was a profound insult to your character, your profession, and the dignity you carry. I saw a uniform, not a veteran engineer. I am deeply sorry. Please accept my apology." Ryan simply nodded, accepting the apology with the calm dignity of a man who needed no external validation. He was interested only in resolution and returning to his simple life. Vivien immediately countered with a powerful correction for her error. "I am offering you the position of Chief of Drivetrain Engineering and Consulting, effective immediately. The starting salary is $750,000, plus performance stock options and a dedicated budget. You will have a private lab and a team of 5 reporting directly to you. Ryan leaned back, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. He was not swayed by the money or the title. He saw the golden handcuffs, the constant global travel, the 24/7 commitment, the relentless pressure. He refused the executive life she offered. Ms. Hart, the only contract I value is the one I have with my son, Ryan said calmly, his voice remaining level. I appreciate the offer, but the life of a chief engineer is incompatible with being a single father. I cannot take that role. My son comes first. Vivien was momentarily stunned. No one ever refused this much money and power. Then what are your terms, Mr. Cole? Name them. My price is not financial. It is logistical, Ryan replied. I will take the role of senior advisor on high-performance integrity and diagnostics. I require the following conditions. First, absolute non-deployability and limited travel. I must be home for Oliver every day at 5 p.m. Second, I need a full-time, dedicated allowance for Oliver's private education and all unexpected family events. Third, I require the sole, unchallengeable authority to ground or red tag any asset at any time, if I perceive a mechanical risk, without bureaucratic challenge. I will not be a servant to your schedule, Ms. Hart. I will be your ultimate safeguard. Vivien listened, her gaze unwavering. She didn't see an employee making demands. She saw a true professional defining his essential boundaries. She understood that his value was intrinsically tied to his integrity, and his integrity was tied to his son. She stood up and extended her hand again, a gesture of partnership, not hierarchy. Mr. Cole, I agree to all 3 terms. You will define the limits of the job. You will be the essential safety valve. Welcome aboard. Ryan shook her hand. The simple, firm gesture completed the most unexpected employment negotiation in Hart Global history. Moments later, Ryan and Oliver walked toward their old, dependable pickup truck. Oliver's head was held high. The golden Lamborghini Huracan, now running smoothly and carrying Vivien Hart to the salvage deal, finally drove safely out of the garage behind them, its engine note a powerful echoing sound of success. Vivien, looking in her rearview mirror as she sped toward her meeting, saw the father and son drive away. She had learned the hardest lesson of her career. Never turn a moment of panic into a joke, because the truth might just start the engine and drive away without you. The quietest people often carry the highest, most indispensable skill. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, leave a comment and subscribe. Skill doesn't need permission to be real.